ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Season 2, Episode 25, A Canterlot Wedding, Part 1. Now, this is the episode in which it turns out that Twilight has always had a brother, lore shock, and her brother, who we have never seen or heard from before, is currently getting married to a woman we've never seen or heard from before, who Twilight herself is also familiar with. But something's just a little bit off about her. We can't really place what. It's just a little bit weird. It's fine. It's fine. Nope. She's evil. To be continued. Happy music. So, as usual, praise for the art direction and general art design. One of the better examples of this is actually right at the beginning. They're having a picnic, and they keep using interesting camera angles, both for the picnic shot itself, but also with how Spike was moving. And they do a lot of really cool angle stuff here. You can tell they were really starting to stretch with this. I remember an episode, and I don't remember the name of it, so give me a second. I want to say it was at the beginning of Season 3 or Season 4. It was actually the first time I noticed on casual viewing the up in animation. I think it was Season 4 with Princess Twilight Sparkle. But I mentioned that because going back through, it's obvious that as we go through, they've just been getting better and better and better at using their tools to make the show look really good. You know? Like, it's surprisingly well designed and well crafted. Anywho... And to give examples for that, because I like to do that, to give evidence, Your Honor, I give it to the witness. This example... Oh, sorry, no. There's this bit where they're at this picnic, and there's this little cake, and she's reading out all of the jobs that she wants all of them to do, which actually makes sense, considering, you know, using the tools at disposal and blah, blah, blah. I need to turn the music down a little bit. Anyways, so she's reading out that thing, and Pinky's like, woo! And as Pinky's going woo, she knocks over the teacup and also makes a tiny little hoof print in the icing of the cake. Now, first of all, just that is a nice little detail by itself. But then, as Twilight is talking, her magic flares up, and she puts the teacup back on and flattens the cake back out, so the hoof print is gone. Really little details like that. I don't want to mention all of them because that will get tedious, but I like to call attention to a few as we go into these later episodes. Later, it's not even halfway through the series. As it's being clear that they're getting better and better at their jobs, because there's a lot of attention to detail and stuff like this, and I want to share these. Yeah, I noticed that too, Savacom. Everyone gets their special jobs. Twilight's job is to be the manager. That's okay, though. She's actually good at that. Anywho, so that of course leads her to being like, I need to deal with that she's getting married to my brother. You know, dun dun dun. And yeah, I think that qualifies as a continuity counter because basically everyone is going to be doing the roles that they did way back in the Summer Sun Festival, you know, as in the first episode of the thing. So yeah, the brother. This is a retcon. This is a traditional classic example of a retcon. It's actually reasonably well done. So I can't really, like, if I was rating this, I couldn't bring myself to give a negative to this. But I do have to admit, my first thought when I first saw this was, oh, you have a brother now, huh? Everyone remember the new guy? Yeah, and Cadence, who... Yeah. Anyways, point being, a brother's being introduced. They also spend, I think part of the reason it works for me is they spend a fairly decent amount of the first half of the episode establishing who her brother is and her relation to him. And thus, via Twilight's connection, we have a little bit of connection and investment into Shining Armor. Now, they have the song, cool, BBBFF. It's a song I could kind of relate to, in all honesty. Me and my sis... Like, for many years there, it was basically just the two of us against the world, and, yeah. You know? So I kind of... I feel that one. I feel that one. It's a decent song, you know, whatever. I said BBBFF. At least I thought I did. It's what I've written down, BBBFF. And I have to explain it. As your PPFF... Anyways. That was a decent gag. That one got me. You notice that you can actually see the force field in the background right off the bat. This is another thing that's just so strange about this episode, because it's as well written as it is badly written. No, seriously. There's actually some legitimately good writing on display, while there is absolutely terrible writing on display. What is this, Star Wars? Sorry, breaking my own rule. But in all honesty, it's just like... Anyways, I'll get more into that later. I have a separate section I want to talk about that. But the point is, there's a lot of foreshadowing, and a lot of it's good. So, we got the background, we got the shield in the distance. I want to mention one other interesting little thing about cadence. So obviously cadence, musical note, blah, blah, blah. And the song BBBFF ends on a genuine cadence the first time, and a deceptive cadence the second time. A little bit of music theory there that I didn't know about because I don't know music theory, but I try to do my research for these nowadays. But I found out something else. Do you know what a cadency is? A cadency is a systematic way to distinguish arms displayed by the descendants of the holder of a coat of arms whose family members have not been granted arms in their own right. Let me summarize that a little bit. Blue blood. Cadency is a heraldic symbol for blue bloods. You can't tell me that's an accident. So, she's an alicorn. Excuse me, I don't think that word was actually introduced yet, and I was paying attention. They didn't use the word once, so she's a princess, which, at this point in time, is what they're calling alicorns. So she's a princess, who is someone who is portrayed as if she is royalty, and they mentioned that she is royalty several times, actually. And she's going to be marrying Shining Armor, aka Captain of the Guard. Which brings us, I suppose, to Shining Armor. I actually have very little to say about him, because as much as they do a decent amount of work in order to establish Shining Armor's connection to Twilight, they don't really do anything to establish Shining Armor. He's got a decent voice actor. No complaints for the voice actor. But he is incredibly bland. I'm not sure I can say he has any character traits at this point, other than being Twilight's brother. Now, what's interesting is Cadence is actually portrayed in an interesting way in this one, because she is portrayed as a complete snob. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. So she meets him. Hang on, actually rewind for a second. First of all, you'll notice that there's some really good sound effects in this episode. Like, a lot of them. They do really good sound design in general, and I just wanted to, as usual, bring praise to the little details there. But they're all super excited about the wedding, which is going to be a common theme throughout the episode. And Spike is super excited because he gets to plan the bachelor's party. I have 3 things to say about that, believe it or not. First of all, the obvious thing, the meme. Ha ha ha, what's a bachelor's party? So that's an adult joke. The thing is, as an adult, I have to admit that the idea of a bachelor party, like, I've been to quite a few bachelor parties in my life. How many of them do you think involve strippers? Or, any kind of nudity or lewd activity? Bingo! None. I know that's kind of the meme in Hollywood, is that bachelor parties are super sexy or whatever. But in my experience in real life, and this also comes from secondhand experience and thirdhand experience as well, that's not how that works out. Yeah, drinking totally happens. There's alcohol. And depending on the individual, there's usually some, there's their friends are there. Sometimes their family members are there. Usually there's some kind of either games or board games, or maybe they're watching a movie or whatever. Just having fun. But the third thing I had to think about was, why is Spike in charge of the bachelor party? It's not like he's the guy who's well connected to most of Canterlot's elite. I want to add another continuity counter for that, because that keeps coming up. And almost every time, it's just kind of quietly in the background. If anything, the only thing that irritates me about the Spike is connected thing is the fact that it doesn't really have a lot of payoff, to my knowledge. mean, honestly, Sierra Mike, it keeps coming up. So yeah, we might have to start making our own count. I don't know how many we're up to at this point. At least 5. Anyways, so yeah, Spike continues to be connected to everyone. That'll come up in Princess Spike, although in a bad way, but let's not get into that. Let's leave that for later. So, sound effects, blah, blah, blah. A threat has been leveled at Canterlot. So what's the threat? And how? Like, does someone mail a letter? Did someone show up and give a villain's speech? Is the Doom counter going on? Like, is there anything? To my knowledge, they never explain where this threat came from. It's just, there's a threat. Now, it's not that hard to headcanon away that one of the changelings, spoiler alert, sent forward a note and was like, hey, or maybe one of them was caught, sure. The question becomes, why send the threat? Because that just makes their job harder. Now, I do actually have a theory for this, which is maybe it fits better in the second episode, but the long and the short of it is, my theory here is that the threat is actually the fact that they already made an attempt, and the attempt failed. And so, because the attempt failed, they were caught in the attempt of trying to take over Canterlot, so they upped the security, which leads to the necessity of doing the Cadence replacement plot. In other words, the original plot had nothing to do with Chrysalis whatsoever, or excuse me, Cadence whatsoever. That's my headcanon. I have no idea if that's true or not. Hang on, Dakota, give me a sec. I haven't even popped onto Discord. I've been busy. Where's Dakota? Oh my god! That's just... I'll have to zoom in on those later. Because, holy crap. But yes, they came through. Anyways, that's my thinking. That they were straight up attacked. They caught it. They weren't sure exactly who was attacking or why. Changelings. And so they're like, okay, beef up security, and then, dealing with that. But this is effectively another plot hole. We're up to 2 so far. Moving on. Let's move on to our third plot hole. Shining Armor is getting married. Now, even in MLP, marriage doesn't happen after a day, right? So, why did he never tell her about this? She mentions, as an aside, that they have been continuing to keep in contact ever since she came to Ponyville. So it's not like they haven't been talking at all. But instead, all of a sudden, someone she's never even heard of is in the wedding phase with her brother, who she apparently has been in contact with. Now, his argument, this is interesting. This actually pisses me off a little bit. This gets into the bad writing things. He mentions his big excuse is he's been busy because of the threat that happened a few days ago. You see the problems here with this? Because there's all of them. It would be like if I'm like, okay, I've got to defend... Like imagine if I could put up a magical force field over my apartment complex right now to defend against the COVID thing. It's like, okay, I've got it up. And as I'm doing that, I'm really busy doing that. But then I meet the most gorgeous woman and I fall in love with her and I decide to marry her. And this whole time I say nothing about this to any of my friends or family. Until I decide to invite my sister to the wedding. Like, I just want to put this into perspective. How stupid this is. Moving on. So then they do this transition thing. Now, there's actually a really good transition. I hate to keep giving credit to the directing, but there's this great shot where the camera basically zooms into Twilight's eye, and in her eye is the flashback. It's a really well done shot, and they do it very quickly and very seamlessly, so props there. Oh, she'd beat the crap out of me, Baron. Especially since she's never really liked most of my girlfriends. With good reason, I might add. So anywho, moving on. So we zoom in, we have the flashback. It's a good transition. Cadence was already an alicorn. Excuse me. Alicorn? She was already a princess back then, which is just something I'm mentioning. And I did actually bother to rewind the episode to double check this. She casts magic once in the whole flashback. but it is a light blue aura. And remember, we're at the point in time in which they are coloring magic based on individuals, so mentioning that. Which, I suppose I'll just mention it now. Every time we see Cadence use magic, it's a fairly predominantly green, it's a very green power. Like, the aura is actually kind of like almost a toxic radioactive green. Very obvious. So, again, surprisingly good foreshadowing, considering the problem. I will freely admit I never noticed that before. I mean, my point is, the only way for that to be foreshadowing is for them to have established what her actual magic aura was beforehand, which they did. And they did it so briefly that most people probably wouldn't notice it, which, in my opinion, is good foreshadowing. So that's nice. I like that. Good detail, good detail. Again, weirdly well written. Which leads to her signature spell. So her signature spell is to make love happen between people. Now, I actually do have a headcanon theory about this, which explains it away. But I just want to say, on the face value, yeah, that's messed up. I don't actually think it is that messed up, though, and I have two reasons for thinking that. Reason number one is the out-of-character reason. Nobody making this is trying to make someone who's horrible. Right? Nobody who is doing this is trying to secretly make this horrifying mind control. You will love each other. Right? Yeah, reason number one is this is My Little Pony. This is not a Voldemort situation, okay? Reason number two, which is an in-character reason, I don't think it's making love. And unfortunately, someone in chat already got there before me. That was Raskor. Props, Raskor. I think this is a heal. To use a Final Fantasy term. She's casting Cure, except rather than curing you physically, it's up here. The only time we actually see it shown here, although it will be shown in the future, but the only time we see it here is to have two people who are arguing about something stupid, I feel like adding. It's about whether or not she's getting a Hoofa-Cure. And then she casts this spell, and then they stop arguing about it and make up. Yeah, I think she's basically a magic therapist. That's a good way to put that, Omni. Now, that is pure headcanon, but in my opinion, that does line up with what we know in-universe. In short, you can't, to go back to the pattern, which I talk about all the time, you can't force the pattern, you can only repair the pattern, right? We actually know what happens when you try to force the pattern, and I'll bring up that example when we get to Starlight Glimmer. Also, this is her signature spell, which is something that's going to become slightly more important in future episodes. Not hers, but the fact that most, unicorns have some kind of signature spell that's like their shtick. We already know what Twilight's is. It's the teleport. And we know what Shining Armor's is. It's the frickin' bubble. So that's neat. But anyways, moving on. I mean, wouldn't that make sense, Sierra Mike? I've actually talked about MLP, about what it's like to be in the moment. To have that moment of anger and fury and just when you literally, biologically cannot think straight. Right? And how one of the biggest defenses and tools in my arsenal I have learned over the years to deal with that is pausing. You give a moment, you give it a second, and it fades a bit, and then your brain can kind of re-engage and kind of pull you away from doing something you're going to regret, right? You don't really want to smash your controller, right, or whatever. So it would actually make a lot of sense if her spell basically gives someone that distance, that pause. Hang on. Just think about this for a second. And then gives them that tool, which they then can chill out about. Now, whether that's true or not, who knows? Again, we're in the realm of headcanon at this point. But I do think that lines up with what we see in character. And she will be using the love spell in the future, too, and it kind of lines up there as well, so I think that makes sense. So, let's get this out of the way. For being someone who can literally change her appearance, Chrysalis is a terrible infiltrator. Like, you guys have watched fiction before, right? You know, the concept of a changeling, the concept of someone who can alter their ability is really old. Really, really, really old when it comes to fiction. And usually it involves someone having a brain about how they infiltrate. Chrysalis is terrible at it. Like, she goes out of her way to... She is actually Talia Hawthorne, it's not a bad thing. She goes out of her way to... not to be overtly a dick to everyone around her for no reason, because she doesn't actually care about the wedding, and she doesn't actually care about the people around her. She's just being a dick because it's her, right? Because as Omni points out, she has a huge ego. You will address me as mi amore cadenze frenze diatore. You know, just what? On top of that, there's the fact that she is confronted with someone who apparently knew her very well when she was younger. Now, any infiltrator who does that will be like, oh, shoot, you know, I have to treat this very carefully and dance around this. Instead, she just brushes her off immediately. She's dumb. I actually don't want to talk much else about Chrysalis right now. We'll talk more about her in the future. However, I do want to add one last point. The fact that she obviously didn't do her research here, in my opinion, kind of leads more towards the idea that this was not the main plan for the changeling infiltration. That this was the backup plan after they were caught last time, the one leading to the high alert. Just a thought. So, look at my notes. Couple little details there, which is kind of neat. Celestia is on full guard duty during the day. Luna is on full guard duty at night. Which actually is interesting because it means people's dreams are being unregulated during this period of time. Also, stay inside, Twilight. It's not safe. So they have COVID too? Sorry. What? But yeah, so I mentioned the fact that she's a terrible infiltrator. This... let's just get to the main thrust of what I want to talk about in this episode. I don't like this episode. I want to. As I've mentioned several times, as I've been pointing out during the Streamination, as you guys have been even adding on to this, there's a lot of legitimately well-designed stuff in this episode. You know, the horn color and the nature of the foreshadowing and how they line things up. There's a lot of really good stuff here. It's also, everyone involved is basically a moron except for Twilight, except Twilight's an idiot too. And I know, I'm the only person on the planet like this apparently, but it really irritates me when the plot moves forward because everyone involved is stupid. However, on going back through this episode with analysis mode, I have to add something. This episode works better without episode 2. Hear me out. Just give me a second, okay? Remove the twist for a second. Remove the Chrysalis thing, okay? What we have is an episode that is not well written, but nevertheless, in a very crude and brutish manner, actually gets across 2 points and an Aesop reasonably well. The first point is the obvious one. You know, the Aesop is the duh. It's the repeated Aesop. Don't ignore your friends, blah, blah, blah. We've actually already had that twice. Once with Pinkie Pie and once with Twilight. However, the point that I think it gets along reasonably well is a point called perspective. Anyone ever see a TNG episode, A Matter of Perspective? I'll go ahead and tell you, it's the episode in which Riker is accused of murdering a guy. If that doesn't get it across, you're probably not going to remember it. I don't remember if that was season 3 or season 4. It's a good episode, better than I thought it was going to be. The point is, though, as they're going through the episode, they use the holodeck to basically simulate people's testimony, going back to the Ace Attorney thing. The problem is, because the holodeck is going off of testimony rather than fact, it comes across as caricaturized each time. Like, each different one is completely different than the others, not just in terms of the events that happen, but in terms of the way people act and how they, interact with each other. Now, that's one of the main points of the episode. Like it or not, we have perspective. This is something I brought up recently when it comes to Death of the Author as well. If you look at something, there is about a 90% chance that someone else can look at the exact same thing and get something differently from it. This is one of the reasons I like doing these Streaminations live, is because I can get your guys' perspective on these things, right? You probably already see where I'm going with this whole tangent. It is not that far out of bounds to presume that what Twilight is perceiving is only because of her already existing bias, which the episode does go way out of its way to establish multiple times. That she is, obviously very possessive of her brother and very connected to the events, and that Cadence herself is frankly rude to her because she hasn't talked to her since forever, right? Again, remove Chrysalis from the equation for a moment, and what you have is Twilight being upset at losing her brother, being upset at someone who used to be her friend and isn't anymore, and is upset because her friends aren't listening to her because they're getting different perspectives, right? And yeah, we do have precedents for Twilight being obsessive. The problem is, and Echt is already getting there, the problem is this doesn't make the episode any better written with regards to the idiot ball, because there is still too much idiot balling going on here. At this point, we devolved to the nature of, to put Leslie as meanly as I possibly can, a bad kids show. In other words, the only way to make the point is to make it as bluntly and horribly as possible. I don't mean to sound insulting, but I know for total certainty that My Little Pony can and will do this, because there's an episode between Starlight Glimmer and Trixie, Bottled Up Anger. You remember that one? That does exactly that. It's still an episode that pisses me off to this very day, because it's so dumb in the way that they present the idea. Yeah, All Bottled Up, that's the one. Like, Trixie basically acts out of character in order to make the point. To make the point as quickly and bluntly as possible. Now, all that being stated, I now have to kill Savacon. There we go. Okay, we're okay. Now I'll res her up. There you go. And now you can speak your novels. Here's the other thing, though. All of this is an attempt to try and segue away from the episode and to share perspective. Because I know this is going to sound strange, but put yourself in the shoes of someone seeing this for the first time with no knowledge of what's coming. Now, again, it doesn't line up perfectly because there is a part 2 and there is a twist, and there are foreshadowings and blah, blah, blah. But it's interesting to think about this episode from the perspective of ignorance of the second episode. Because the twist at the end is actually very well done. It's badly set up, but it's very well paid off. Like, because remember, Chrysalis makes no real appearance in this episode. I mean, you know what I mean? We don't see Chrysalis in her natural form. There is no presentation of the changelings. In fact, they don't even mention the changelings in this episode. Just a threat, right? They do a pretty terrible build-up, but a really awesome payoff. They do that final song, BBBFF, and they do the thing where she has the evil eyes as she's walking off, and she sends her down into some kind of green flame. Nobody's saying it. And cut to credits, right? It's so weird. Here's the real problem, though. I think this episode is substantially worse because of part 2. Because part 2 gives me the perspective. This is, I think, one of the only times I can think about this. You know what Babylon 5 effect is, right? I'll just tell you because it's not actually up on the website yet because I haven't had time. Babylon 5 effect is when you go back through something and not only was it foreshadowed, but it's different because you know. That's the big thing. That's the critical point of Babylon 5 effect, is that the first time it looks like it's A, but when you go back through it with the knowledge of what's coming, it now looks like B. That is Babylon 5 effect right there. This kind of is Babylon 5 effect, but it makes it worse. Instead, because usually Babylon 5 effect is a positive thing. It makes things better. But here, it made this worse. Like, going back through, I'm just sitting here like, ugh, she's not even trying. She's being so overt about this. Is she just mind-controlling everyone around her like Savicom posits? I mean, I wouldn't put it past her. She does have a mind control spell. It's ridiculous. And in my mind, I can't properly enjoy this episode because I know where it's going. I'm not sure I can think of another example like that. Yeah, Savicom, please, share your thoughts before I stab you again. Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, and Iron Man 2 were the ones before Avengers, period. If you want the list after Avengers, I can give you that, period. Which is funny, Darth Tyrant, because that does make it worse in contrast. If I could share, really quick. One thing... Lol, Lord Harrimont. One thing that I have to say, yes, she did, Dream Whisperer, that really pisses me off about this episode is it manages to hit 2 points that I hate in fiction. Ironically, both of them I tend to associate with Star Trek, and I've complained about both of them in Star Trek. Point 1, someone's acting differently, nobody notices. God, that pisses me off and frustrates the hell out of me. Because... come on, right? Now, I know. You could argue that nobody should know that Cadence is acting differently, but there is clearly some shenanigans going on, and nobody bats an eyelash except for Twilight. This is by no means the worst example I can think of that, because that would probably be when Picard is suddenly acting completely differently. Which happens twice in TNG, but let's not get into that. The second thing is actually related. It's called Cassandra Truth. I hate Cassandra Truth. I don't even have words to explain it. I really do not like Cassandra Truth in fiction. It drives me batty when someone knows something and tries to tell other people and no one believes them. I don't know why, but that has always been such a huge pet peeve of mine in fiction, and I hate every time it's used. To compound that, they use it badly, because when Twilight finally decides to start pushing her perspective, she does so badly. This is another thing that usually happens to do when it comes to Cassandra Truth, aka, hear me out, okay? Hey guys, carrots are secretly people. And none of you believe me. There you go, Cassandra Truth. Okay, now, obviously that's a lie, but just bear with me, okay? Please. Now, what's OOTP? Now, imagine for a moment that I am right about the fact that carrots are people, but, Airbrow 5. But when I go to tell you, I rush in, and I've got disheveled hair, and I'm like, oh my god, guys, you understand, carrots are people, stop touching that right now. You can't eat carrots anymore, you can't do it, you don't understand, they're people. In short, I come across as a rambling madman. This episode does both of those. There is a Cassandra Truth that she has absolutely no idea how to present. In the big final scene where she's like, she's terrible about the way she presents it. She actually comes across as someone who's just raving. Then, Shining explains everything away, and everyone shuns her, and they all just leave her alone in the room, which I'm not even going to get into that. And then we have the reprise of the song, which is actually excellent. This episode literally gives me whiplash because of how much it goes back and forth between excellent and frustrating. Excellent song with a cadence in it, a deceptive cadence in the music. Look it up. Yeah, Celestia also bails on her, scolding her as she goes. She's also been kicked out of the wedding by her brother, who apparently she's so close to. And then the excellent ending, which, you know, ha 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 ha. You what? Now, whoops. Yeah, this is just imagine what's the thing where you get a paddle and there's like a ball attached to a string and you go bunk 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 bunk. What's that called? Because that's this episode. Like this is the ball is the quality level and it's just bunk 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 bunk. Paddle ball? I don't know. Hang on, I never actually read Savacom's earlier thing. Oh, yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that, Savacom. In fact, we have just reached the point of why this pisses me off so much. Okay. You could say as much as you want about how realistic this is, or how believable it is, or how people suck in real life, and all that's valid, you know. Metronome, that's also totally valid. But the real reason I want to bring this point up here is because... First of all, they're supposed to be actual friends by this point. This is the end of Season 2. They're supposed to be actually friends at this point in time. Even if there is no Part 2, even if there's no Chrysalis, what should have happened is at least one of the people, including her beloved brother, her 5 best friends, and her mentor and effectively mother, should have sat down and said, okay, let's talk about this. This obviously means something to you. You're obviously legitimately worked up about this. Let's chill. Instead, everyone universally shuns her. Which leads me to my final point. I think they're still not really friends. Oh, they're more friends than they were in Season 1. But remember, I made the point at the beginning of Season 2 that they had only just begun being friends, that they only had actually started the process of understanding what friendship is at the beginning of Season 2 with the Discord incident. I stand by that theory, having gone through with analysis mode on. And at this point now, at the end of Season 2, I think Season 2, if I were to summarize it, would actually be about the main 6 learning how to be friends with each other. Actual friends, not just buddies or people you hang out with. I think this will continue through Season 3, to be completely blunt. Not saying it really defends the episode, per se, because it still is frustrating and badly written and idiot-balling. But I stand by that point. I have to admit, then, so nobody's bringing up the question I thought you'd bring up, so let me go ahead and ask the question of myself. When do they become real friends? I have a theory for that, but that's by vague memory. And remember, my memories of this show fade very fast from about Season 3 onwards. So I'm going to be watching to see if I can point out a specific point in which I feel like they specifically get to the point where they actually become friends. Or I'm saying that wrong. I'm saying that wrong. Where they actually finish becoming friends. It's not like it's just a, right? It's a kind of a thing. And I am encouraging you and asking you to do the same thing. And see what you guys think of this as well. Which leads me to hitting this button.